It's Ivy Slater, and you're listening to Her Success Story podcast, a show where gutsy businesswomen share their success journey. So Brenda, I don't want to sit here and read all about you. Your story was so meaningful to me when we chatted. Please welcome Brenda Jacobsen. Thanks for joining us on Her Success Story.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So can you share a little bit how you came to your backstory before STS Capital? You know, where did this come from? Where did this journey start?
Yeah, I think it was never an intentional path. To work for a global M&A firm without a banking background didn't really seem possible until I met our founder, Rob Follows. But I think the early interest in this space came from deal making, growing the company that I first ran, which was a group of medical centers focused on work-related medicine. So a small niche called occupational medicine. And when I started with the company, we had one clinic and our goal was to grow. It was necessary because it was a low profit margin business, but it was also a fun dream with the owner of having a footprint that would be hard to penetrate for competitors, that would cover multiple counties or maybe even multiple states in the Southeast. And so I had quite a bit of authority to go out and find other clinics like ours, typically owned by doctors, and then to vet them, go through the whole diligence process, put together an offer if they met our criteria, and then buy them and then help integrate them. And so we did quite a few of those transactions, growing up to, I think at our biggest, around 20 centers, most of those through acquisitions. And, it's interesting when you're buying something that someone's put 25 years into, there's lots of care and wanting to ensure that the ongoing viability and for the team. And so there were deep relationships created in those processes. And we didn't always say yes. We said no a couple of times. And we didn't always buy winning opportunities. There were some that were not what we expected them to be or didn't perform the way we expected them to, but that's all part of the process. And so it was that early M&A experience that I think got me excited about the prospect. And then ultimately we sold that group to a strategic buyer. And I was given the authority to run the process along with our lawyer. And I had been able to develop a really fun competitive bidding environment between the two national players. And, I really love to win. And so it was an early taste of that.
It's exciting.
It's exciting to win. Yes.
It's exciting to win. It's when you're going against competitive bidders and buying and selling businesses, it's a little nerve wracking.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of deep breaths.
Right. Well, actually, I have an incredibly high tolerance for discomfort. I think you have to run a business when cash flow and making payroll and all these things. I mean, this was a 35-year-old company, but I think the business owners and operators out there, it resonates. There are times when cash is tight and you have sleepless nights associated with that. And so, but I just was born to tolerate quite a bit of worry. And so I could stay in it probably, a bit of a game. I don't know if I like the term chicken, but it's kind of like who's going to blink first, right? A staring competition. It took me a long time to blink. And, that's the beauty of, having someone else validate that what you think your business is worth, having two actually really big players in the space say you're right, and both of them wanting to win. I was able to leverage that. I knew the competitors well. I knew what made us valuable. I knew what they could layer into our business. And so it ended up being an incredible transaction for our owners, a good one for me. I knew I also was selling myself out of a job. And so I stayed on.
Isn't that interesting? And that's quite the feeling of when you know that you're doing something for the greater good of the company, the greater good of the leadership.
Yes.
And what's going to happen to me in the long run? And, you know, there's two sides of that coin. And
Very much so.
there exactly. There's two sides. It's like, oh my goodness, what's going to happen to me? I'm selling myself out of the job. Or, hi, I'm selling myself into what is unknown in opportunity.
Yes. Well, there was a moment. So before we actually considered putting ourselves on the market, I actually had a moment where my gut said we needed to explore it. And I had to reconcile with the fact that I knew that I was scared about looking for what was next. I hadn't looked for a job in many years. I had grown into CEO at that point in this company and wasn't sure if I could find another role that I was really excited about, that had that much autonomy and freedom, but also responsibility. And so I had to sit with that for a bit. And because I knew if I didn't really get over it, I was going to get in the way of the process. My own stuff would come up and it wouldn't be rational. It wouldn't be in service of what we were trying to accomplish. It wouldn't be in service of what was best for the business. And so after I got over that, it was full steam ahead. Like it was just nothing was going to hold me back. And really, like, you know, I kind of like fell across the finish line because it's exhausting to run the business and run a process. And as quick as it was,
it's truly running two businesses simultaneously at 100%.
It was. And because we weren't ever sure, and you're never sure it's going to happen until it's done, it wasn't public knowledge to everybody in the organization that we were going through this, because there would have been likely a lot of fear around their jobs conveying, and we didn't want people to leave. And it was important that the clinic stay staffed. So the sequencing was also very stressful. So it feels almost like more than two jobs. But yeah, so I kind of fell across the finish line, transitioned really quickly because nothing about the role that I had been in was unique. I always felt like it was important to have depth in the relationships and depth in, you know, the knowledge across the board. And so the transition was quick. And I started to quickly also feel like I'm not doing anything important here. You know, they're kind to kind of keep me around. And that was my commitment and their commitment. They were honoring it, but I just knew it was time for me to go. And so I started to think, wow, what am I I don't even know how to look for another job, right? This is 2016, early 2017. And so I put my resume together, and fortunately I had a coach that I was working with at that time. And I said, you know, I've got this like really great plan. There are all these steps involved of all these ways I'm going to let people know, but not let my current employer know, because I didn't want to, you know, disrupt things. And he kind of looked at me and he's like, yeah, that feels really thoughtful and pretty hard. And I kind of like, or you could just kind of like make it easy and start telling people, you know, just, you know, kind of come at it a bit lighter in your approach. And I could feel like the relief of that in like literally in my body.
It goes through your body. When you feel that type of
felt,
release, it 100% goes through your body.
And it was something that only someone else that I trusted could tell me, versus like a way that I could have seen that myself. And what's crazy is within 2 weeks of that approach, you know, this kind of lighter, casual, I'm just going to let the kind of world know and see what comes at me. This opportunity came to run an early stage startup in the corporate mindfulness training space. And it was such an incredible extension of the B2B2C work I had been doing with my first company. But like an iterative and inspiring and exciting different version of it. So still B2B2C, because it was corporate engagements they were buying access to our coaching platform for their employees to help build resilience and combat stress and, you know, just be more agile and focused at work. And so I thought that would be such a really neat iteration, kind of a second act of what I had done initially. And I got to build a team and build out an organization that had never had a full-time CEO at that point. And dip my toe into the venture-backed world and take a shot at fundraising. And so it was, and be closer to the action again, because I had at that point, when with the company we sold, there were quite a few levels in between me and clients, or me and patients. And this one got me direct access again, because I was selling the company and selling to clients. And so all of those felt like a really exciting opportunity for me.
And I will say, it's when you get into any new venture, to connect to the people in the organization, but as well as connecting to the clients, gives you an immediate different perspective that is so valuable.
It is.
And you gain so much more knowledge, so much faster. I'm not going to say this in eloquent words or anything else, is if you want fast-paced knowledge, talk to your clients.
For sure. And especially because I had come in to a couple of existing clients, well-known brands, global consulting firms, law firms. And so the brand recognition was there, but figuring out how to scale. And so I spent 5 years there, learned a ton. And that's what's important to me. I have to feel like I'm really learning something new, whether it's a new industry or new facets of business. I had never raised outside capital before. So that was something.
That's a whole new experience.
That is another podcast for us. But also,
I'm going to call you on that one.
Okay, perfect. How to manage an early stage board, how to build a board and then manage an early stage board. We were part of a portfolio, so how to really nurture and care for the other organizations or companies in the portfolio, but also remain hyper focused on our growth and success. And so was there for 5 years through lots of iterations, learned a ton, but also saw that through some mergers, actually a merger of like sizes with another organization in the consumer media space, there was some new leadership that I think was meant to serve, and I'm not interested at all in trying to keep a title or role if I'm not the one back to serving the business first. And so I had a realization that my time there was done. And instead of my natural kind of instinct to just jump into another operator role, running another company, I realized I wanted more autonomy and control over my life. I wanted to continue to work, and I liked the idea of it being more project-based so that I could spend a lot. I was enjoying the quality time with my kids. COVID brought me home from being in the office, and I wasn't willing to just go back to a model where I didn't see them until dinner time every night, or hoped to catch them in the morning before I took the train downtown. And so I reactivated my CPA license in Illinois and had been doing a kind of combination of some fractional CFO consulting, some board work, and then met Rob Follows at STS. And Rob was at an event of other female women business leaders that I was at, and I was speaking, and he came up to me and he said, I have this global M&A firm and I'm looking for more women to add to my team. And I thought, this is surprisingly candid and refreshing to have someone just own the fact that there was not enough, he wasn't comfortable with the representation of women in this category. And this is the main client facing category. And that's what I said, Rob, I'm thrilled that you've, extended this kind of invitation to explore, but I don't have a banking background. My background's not in finance. And he's like, no, that's the beauty of it. We are a different approach to M&A work, where we're using people who've been through it, operators, entrepreneurs, family business owners. We're using that role instead of a traditional investment banking or finance role to co-voyage with the business owner through the journey of selling, because we know that there's a financial, likely the most significant financial event in the business owner's life, but there is also, there is also an incredibly emotional journey of decoupling from what most of our clients are the founders and or families that have founded the business, decoupling from what you've spent years, sometimes decades building. And so to have someone who can draw from the experience directly, we find is such a valuable attribute to creating an extraordinary exit for our clients.
And I have to say, and hats off to Rob, it is a unique perspective because it's, usually in this space, it's the smartest of smart, strong educational backgrounds, strong backgrounds in investment banking and in a variety of ways over the years to then come into this M&A space. Yet his approach is, wow, if I gather people together who's been through this, because we could have all the back office brilliance,
Exactly.
but only the people sitting at the table get the emotional transition. Because I'll always say, so I have 2 children that I put through school and I birthed 2 businesses that put me through school. And it's true, right? Those are 2 additional children I've had in my lifetime. We get attached to what we build. Building a business over X amount of years, however many years that is, it is nurturing and a child. You see that child from infancy through toddler to teens through college, and then and you get to the scaling, and that now that child is getting, has different homes, right? Or whatever that is, or different degrees, or however we want to think about that. So when you sell something that you have built over 5 years to 50 years, there's an emotion
to generations in some
to generations,
right? Yeah.
It's a very emotional attachment, and having somebody at the table with you who gets that piece is, I can only imagine what a differentiator that is.
Well, yeah, I think it is. And I think that combined with the fact that we are also industry agnostic and global. And so those 3 attributes, I think, make us very different. So we're not focused on any particular industries. We're open to all industries. And because we're all business operators, we have to be able to come in, quickly learn about a business, and then translate what's uniquely valuable about that enterprise to potential buyers. And so that gives us the opportunity to come up to speed on certainly the financials, right? The revenues and the profits and the margins and all that. But we also really can, I think, uniquely dig out those pieces that to the right buyers would differentiate, not just a multiple off the money that they're making, but something really unique. It could be the intellectual property, it could be the leadership team, it could be manufacturing or distribution networks. It could be so many different things that make that business valuable. And so we as business leaders can really pull all that out, put it together and market it across the world, because the buyer could be around the globe. The buyer is, we're never going to expect that the buyer is going to be in your industry or in even the continent that you operate primarily in. We just wouldn't take that for granted. So by putting those components together, we create the optimal opportunity to maximize the return for the business owners on what they built, so that they can get the most out of their exit.
So what has kept you now in this space? What is intriguing to you? You've had a journey, you've done a variety of different things on the leadership side. It is not as usual to have, women leading in the M&A space, in the private equity space. What has now kept you intrigued and continuing down this path?
Well, I think for me, I'm not exclusively focused on female entrepreneurs or female business owners, but I do really get excited when a call is set up and I join, and the face of a female founder when they see that it could be another woman sitting next to them as their advocate through this. It's quite thrilling for me. And I came from a family business, and I understand what makes family businesses amazing and gratifying, and also really challenging and hard. And that's with just a couple family members involved. Some of our clients have dozens of family members involved, and it's complex and different. And it's the kind of thing you can't learn from unless you've been in. It's, I think, one of few business attributes that really is about being experienced in it versus learning about it. And so I feel like every client is a kind of a new puzzle, a new opportunity to learn about a new industry, which I love. I love learning about understanding what motivates and drives that exit, that decision to sell, because it's not just money. It's often kind of the spot we were in, where I was worried about the ongoing viability of the business. There were external factors that could have really, really made it difficult for us to survive. And so when you start to, they weren't imminent, they weren't coming next year per se, we never know when they would, or that they would present at all. But when you start to track some of those risks, an exit may be the clearest path to maintaining wealth. I also think it's fun because it used to be, I think, that most businesses that thought about transitioning to the next generation, they saw that as really one of the only paths to ongoing viability for the business. And I'm discovering more and more families that see an exit as a way to enable the next generation to do something they're really passionate about. The assumption that you're going to actually create, birth, whether literally or have a family member that is going to be the best candidate to run the business after the founder. I mean, the data just shows that's not true. It's very unlikely, that your son, your daughter, your niece, your nephew, your relative is going to be the best person to step in and take over, after the founder wants to step aside. And so why not contemplate an exit and then allow that next generation to start what they want to start, or pursue what they're passionate about. But don't assume that transitioning to the next generation is the only path. We're just seeing that more and more families are realizing that that's not necessarily actually setting the family up to preserve that wealth that's been accumulated.
And, I know in people I've worked with over the years, sometimes they say, the first generation builds it, the second generation expands it, the third generation, the expression goes that they tank the company, but it's also very much in looking from where you're sharing is an enlightening place is, well, by the time we get to the third generation, shouldn't this generation have an opportunity to pursue their dreams and not just take on responsibility? Brenda, you and I have had numerous conversations about living a great life and building businesses and careers to have a great life. Just because you're the heir apparent doesn't mean that this is your goal, desire, and dream. It doesn't mean it's in your skill set. It just happens to be your parent of some sort, or your grandparent of some sort, or some family member extension. Ladies and gentlemen, you get me there. We should all be able to pursue our dreams and build lovely lives, wonderful lives. And just because we have a great business in our family doesn't mean we're meant to lead it. And how do we preserve the wonderful and preserve and honor the founders 1, 2, or more generations back and what they did? And that's sometimes to sell and have even more greatness come to it.
That's exactly it. And that's all assuming that there's ongoing viability of that business after generations. Yeah.
So if I can ask you one tip from the journey you've been on, And for our listeners today, whether they're founders, whether they're in the M&A space, whether they're looking to start something up, what's one little tip you can share forward for them to be thinking about?
Well, I'll share one and make sure that this resonates with your question, because that's a pretty broad question. So
it's a very broad question. I'm letting you run with this where you want to go.
Thank you. If you're starting something new, try to start it without investors. I think that there is a very valuable way that having to get to profitability, which means that you're making more money than you're spending, that the act of having that pressure on a new business helps you make good decisions. So I would say if you can avoid taking in investor dollars, friends and family, that's one thing. But I think there's this way that new entrepreneurs are just assuming they have to go out and raise venture capital, let's say. I don't believe that's the only path forward. I know it's not. And so I encourage entrepreneurs to really use that as a kind of way to put pressure on yourselves to make sure that what you're doing is valued in the marketplace. So that's number one. If you're contemplating an exit, make sure the business doesn't rely on you if you're the founder. And so you can't expect someone to come in and buy the business if the only person that has all the key relationships, that understands all the nuances of the business, is you as the founder. And so it's really important that when we work with our clients, they've often started that process, but I would say start to think about how the business remains successful after your departure, and make decisions that empower individuals to be able to take on those pieces that may be uniquely yours at that moment.
I think those are fabulous tips. Fabulous tips. And I agree with you. Don't just rush to raise capital. Set up a structure, set up a business, start some sales, and make sure you have something in the marketplace. Know that by doing that, you're testing it and making sure you're going in the right direction. And I love getting to profitability before you look for investors to scale. I think that is brilliant.
Agree.
So Brenda, thank you for joining me here today on Her Success Story.
Oh, I'm so thrilled to have been here. Thank you for inviting me to join you.
And listeners, we're doing a whole series on M&A, private equity, a little venture capital, a little bit of everything in this mix. Take a moment, check out everybody in the series, see what resonates with you, what is helpful for you in your journey. And for listening in today in Brenda and I's conversation, take a moment and give yourself the gift of writing down one takeaway or aha for yourself for this. Put it in your phone, write it down in a note, write it in the show notes right here. And then make a decision. What are you going to take? What are you going to do with that one piece, that one takeaway, the one aha that is going to help you continue to propel your career, your businesses, your trajectory forward? Thank you for joining us here today on Her Success Story. See you next time.